Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another book reviews by Nomdarkham. I am actually very proud of myself because I've been consistent. I made myself a promise that this year I want to build a book community. I want to do book reviews. I want to start a book club. I want to start a website. I want to review libraries, which is to come. And I'm very happy that I'm about to do my third book review. If you haven't caught up as yet, my name is Joel. I'm based in Jamaica. I run a book community on nomdarkham.com. Nomdarkham is my surname, so I decided to do something very interesting with it. If you haven't caught up yet, I've reviewed 2 books already, so you can go and check those out. And for my third book review, I'm very, very happy to be reviewing a book that everybody kind of have been talking about, 107 Days by Kamala Harris. Now, for most of you who don't know me, I'm actually a very big political junkie. I love politics, I follow up with politics, and this is one of those races that I've been following up with, or I followed up with rather. But even before that, the very first presidential campaign when Kamala would have sent out, would have launched her campaign, and then eventually, what would have happened? She withdrew from it. Joe Biden came out, and she was eventually chosen as his running mate. There was a lot of drama around that because he had made a post, "My vice president will be a woman," and we were all guessing, is it Kamala Harris, is it Val Demings, is it Karen Bass, all sorts of stuff. But I am also a journalist, and a journalist always tries to tell the truth and find out and research all the information. So during this presidential campaign, there were so many information going around. Theories, feedback, independent thinking, and a lot. And I never shared anything, any of my views apart from having conversations with friends. And I'm very happy that we can all make a conscious decision to read and find out for ourselves what transpired during those 107 days. So I actually read this book in March, again, as a part of Women's History Month. I read this book, and I also read The Power by Jacinda Ardern. You can go and check out that book review because I actually reviewed that book. But 107 Days was very interesting because there were several moving parts to it. But again, I was very interested in finding out what happened during those days. Now, with my book reviews, I normally start off by giving a little bit of information and insight. The book was published in September 2025. It's called 107 Days. The author is Kamala Harris. It's 300 pages. The book itself is about 320, but in terms of content, the most important part that you need to know, 320 pages. And I really consider this to be a campaign diary because the way how the book is written, it's by dates, days counting down, very specific days, leading up to when she started campaigning, or actually when she just realized that she had to become the presidential nominee. And I use had to because there's a lot of, you have to read it to really understand why I even said that. Leading up to, the certification of the results while she was vice president at the time. Usually I give a little blurb. So for the first time and with surprising and revealing insights, Kamala Harris tells the story of one of the wildest and most consequential presidential campaigns in American history. She wrote, "Your service code name is Pioneer. You are the first woman in history to be elected Vice President of the United States. On July 21st, 2024, your running mate, Joe Biden, announces that he will not be seeking re-election. The presidential election will occur on November 5th, 2024. You have 107 days." So we get a nice chronicle of what happened. And I'm not going to share everything because I do believe that you all need to go and read it for yourselves, but I can give you some standout moments. While reading this book, how I felt about it, I was very happy that there were a lot of answers to some questions I had. So for instance, one of the key moments for me, and I've always been positive about it, was on September 13th. And this is 53 days to the election. Something happened on September 13th. Laura Loomer, if you all know Laura Loomer, she's on Twitter. And she had traveled on Trump's plane to the debates, to the 9/11 memorials and his rallies. It was clear that her special brand of Val crazy was getting in his head. This is by what Kamala wrote, not me, I say. She suggested on social media that the earrings I'd worn on the debate stage were really earpieces through which I was being fed answers. Trump parroted that line in his next speech. I learned later that the sales of those Tiffany pearl and gold earrings I'd worn and of an earpiece that looked similar had both skyrocketed. Now, I remember this vividly. Everybody on social media saying the lady wearing Secret Service earpiece, being fed questions, being fed answers, and that was crazy. It was crazy. So that was a key moment for me that stood out. There were some other moments that stood out in terms of when she had sent a text message to a few people telling them, the situation and how they responded. And that was interesting, to see somebody like a Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, how he responded versus how the Clintons responded versus how the Obamas responded. And, it's telling about what politics is and how many things, how things can change, how things happen, and, the whole works. But I know I just went into the book. I highlighted the very beginning of it while I was reading it. And the very first sentences were, "Auntie, auntie, a small fist wrapped gently on my bedroom door." And I think that kind of set up how the rest of this book would have gone in terms of the people who she held very close to her, how they supported her husband, Doug, who was the first second gentleman in the history of the United States, and just how everything played out, but also the other side of it. And when I come to the themes, I'll tell you more about that. But yeah, so I want to just go back to kind of like tell you how the tone of the book was set. But yeah, so Standout Moment was that September 13th with Laura Loomer and the Earring. And there were some other things that happened throughout the book that had me, like, what? And to actually like hear it from her directly, know what transpired, it's testament to the fact that at the end of the day, anybody can say whatever they want to say, but you're the only teller to your story. Teller of your story, rather. There was something else that happened that was interesting. The preparation for the debates. The preparation for the debates saw some really intense behind the scenes, very visual representation of how elections are so serious in the United States. So while Kamala Harris was preparing for election, they actually had one of our colleagues actually dressed as Trump and was showcasing his exact demeanor in terms of how he would appear on the stage. And they had to do that quite a bit of time to build up her stance and just her poise and posture and everything and how she would respond to him. I found that to be very interesting because it gave us an idea in terms of the fact that when these people are campaigning, millions of people are watching. When there's a debate, millions of people around the world are tuning because even though it's a US election, those in the Caribbean, those in Europe, those in Africa, everybody is watching because of the position that the US has around the world in terms of being a very powerful country, trade, just about everything global, globalization, money and travel and tourism and so many things. So elections do have an impact. So that was interesting to highlight. But the entire book really centers around the fact that Biden's withdrawal would have sent this immediate ripple effect of her position as vice president and taking up that mantle to actually bring the party across the finish line. Usually when an election is happening, people have days to prepare, not even more days, years to prepare, at least 2 years in advance. You kind of start shape up. You figure out who your running mate going to be and all that kind of thing, and know where to elect a candidate from the party to go and run. Usually have a primary, people run off against each other, and then they select the best candidate. 107 days, none of that could have happened. It could have happened, but no, because it just was not sensible. People just had to decide who they're going to support and throw their support around. There were some other things that stood out. There was another highlighted section I had. I'm going to actually speak about this a little later after I mentioned the theme. I spoke about that part of it. And obviously, I mentioned the whole concept of the book and getting like an update. We got a very detailed account of the behind the scenes, and that's something that I appreciated while reading the book. I'm somebody that when I read a book, I really want to be able to follow the story, and I find it that I was able to do that based on how it was written, which is why I appreciate, and I've termed this a campaign diary. Because, for example, I turned to September 11, 55 days to the election. The first words that came out were I'd had about 2 hours sleep when the alarm on my phone went off in my New York hotel room. The night before, Doug and I had gone from the debate stage to the holding room where the entire team was assembled. So I'm now visually seeing everything that happened, things that were run in the news, outfits that were worn, I'm able to go back and look at images, how she was feeling in that moment. There's a particular moment where the first lady, who at the time, would have been Jill Biden, confronted Doug about support and where they were on the line of the support. I think this came after the debate because remember, President Biden had challenges during the debate, and it looked like the man wasn't really planning to withdraw, but the pressure that came, would have resulted in that. And I think there was a lot of saltiness happening between both parties, and that would have resulted in some tension. And Jill Biden kind of pulled Doug aside and was asking him about this, and Doug was shaken by it, and Kamala would have picked it up, and the body language. But when you go back and watch the video, you could actually see all that taking place and happening when you got some perspective. I'm not going to tell you everything because I don't want to tell you everything about the book. I love to talk about themes. There were some themes that came out in this book. Resilience after defeat. That's theme. That theme in particular looks at how graceful Kamala was after defeat, with being hopeful about what the future could bring. And it's not necessarily being hopeful about like seeking re-election or whatever, but just the fact that she still was able to get people to support her during the election, the whole divisive uproar that came from the election during that period, but there was a big theme of resilience after defeat. The fact that she's going to continue to fight, her position is that I'll never give up. I'll continue to fight for the American people. That was interesting. The second theme was teamwork and trust. We saw where trust fell out for some folks. We saw where, there was a very huge community of supporters around her, people leaving their families to come and support this campaign, be there side by side, seeing her through the journey. And another theme that came out for me was leadership in crisis. The fact that she had very little time for preparation and second guessing. Again, you're running a campaign. This is a consequential election. There is so much to do, but the time is so little, 107 days. You have 2 years. You can decide, okay, this is going to be my running mate. This is going to be my potential chief of staff. You have to decide all of that. And speaking of running mate, she did detail the process towards that, who she would have wanted to run with, originally, and the fact that couldn't work out because two persons on a ticket that the US is still trying to catch up with in terms of embracing people fully, and how she arrived at her running mate, and the process behind that. That was some drama, so I recommend you go and read that as well. Now, my favorite part of the book, and which was very painful as well, happened closer to the end on page 290. After the election, the counting, the vote, the winner being selected, blah, blah, blah. She had a statement here that said, as I walked into that chamber, I knew that the eyes of the world were on me. I would have to muster the strength to override my internal emotional storm. As vice president and as Kamala Harris, I had to call on every ounce of poise and the self-discipline I possessed. I owed it to myself and to the nation to demonstrate what I believed, that this moment was bigger than any one individual. And this was about the certification of the election. So you can only imagine that you're certifying your own defeat, and that's very painful. I enjoyed this book. I'm not gonna lie. I enjoyed the photos and the visuals that were given. At the beginning of the book, we could see her with some headphones, which was day one of 107. And she actually kind of motivated me to go back to my string headphones, because she mentioned this AirPods and the Bluetooth and wireless madness. Yes. So I appreciated the images that were inside there. There were photos, again, of when the certification was happening. You could see in her face how much of an emotional internal battle she was having. There were photos of the, watching the election when she was traveling with her nieces, photos of interviews and meeting her community organizers. And I appreciated that bits of it because it did show the human side of what happens during a presidential campaign. And of course, the back of the book had one of the most iconic photos with a young girl who I believe would have been her niece watching on her at one of the conventions when she was announced as the nominee. So I did enjoy the book. It was a very simple read. I appreciated the fact that I was able to find all the truths to a lot of noise and theories and conspiracies that were going around. And I would give this book. It was very raw, and I like I like when an author is very raw and honest. And I would give this book a 3.9 out of 5. I would give it a 3.9 out of 5. I think, again, because it is I wasn't looking for a massive leadership life update kind of approach, and I got what I wanted. A diary, an account, this is what happened, let me clarify this, and I appreciated it. If this book was a song, it obviously would be Freedom by Beyonce, because that was a campaign song we heard that song throughout the entire campaign, so it would be Freedom by Beyonce. So thank you so much for watching another book review by Nomdarkham. I would recommend you take a read of 107 Days by Kamala Harris.
Keep on running 'cause